Welcome back to our annual Distinguished Speaker event for the Friends of our Wellfleet Library. After 2 long years without it, so it feels pretty good to be back here. I'm Susan Bruce, I'm the president of the Friends, and there are a lot of volunteers in the room who have been working for the Friends of the Library for a long time. Quick reminder, turn off your phones. See, that was needed. And there will be a video of this event, thanks to Evan Portnoy, who's up there. Check the library site later for details about where that will be shown. After the talk, we're going to have a very short Q&A. We probably can't get to all the comments and questions. And again, there will be book signing downstairs. And there are books for sale downstairs if you would like to purchase a book. To begin, we've had many wonderful speakers here over the years. Historians, a cartoonist, novelists, and journalists, a paleontologist, Nobel laureate. We even have another congressman, Barney Frank. And I just learned this morning while swimming in the bay that Norman Mailer apparently drew a big crowd here, so thank you. But I have to say that we've never ever sold out the tickets in just a few days until this summer. Our speaker won his primary last month with 94% of the vote. This item deserves applause, but last month his book, We the Students, was banned by the state of Texas. The next day, Vladimir Putin banned him from Russia for life. His current book, Unthinkable, which is the book that's for sale tonight, it's been #1 on so many bestseller lists for the last 6 months or so, ever since it was published. And as you've seen, it's available here today. I would only say that it seems there's much affection and deep respect for this man who's graciously giving his time during a short summer break to this event. So please welcome Congressman James.
Wellfleet, hello Borough, P-Town, East-Town, Orleans, Munster, and I am supporting all of you guys. Thank you for welcoming me here. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you, Susan Bruce, for that lovely introduction. I was indeed banned in Texas, and the very next day banned in Russia. But I'm doing all right on Cape Cod. I issued a press release saying that I look forward to doing my next book tour for We the Students when it comes out in its next edition in Texas, and I look forward to going to a free democratic Russia after I visit So thank you, and I feel like I brought some Capitol Hill weather up here to the church. It's Capitol Hill's where I like to say it's not the heat, it's the stupidity. But my wife Sarah is here, my older daughter Hannah is here. important to us. It's been important to me my entire life. Our kids basically grew up here in the summers. Hannah and Tommy and Jonathan, and Tommy worked across the street at the Wellfleet market one summer. I think that was his first job, and he wrote an essay actually about people who talk to people who are working in service jobs and people who don't talk to people who are working in service jobs. It's a beautiful essay that he wrote. But I want to say thank you to the people who hopefully have been so good to us, especially through the last few years, which have been such hard years. And I remember after we lost Tommy, when we came up to Wellfleet, and there were all these flowers and stones that people were painting things on and letters, and it really made us feel like we have a second home and a second community here in this beautiful town. So thank you. And I want to say thank you to Wellfleet Library and the Friends of Wellfleet Library. When they asked me, I said, this is the least I can do after all the overdue library books. And how much I've used the library. It's where I used to write papers sometimes. It's where I used to grade papers as a law professor. I even worked some on my book Unthinkable at the library. And I think I even went there to print out once when our printer first broke before my friend Lisa Kumansky said she printed it out for me. Lucy. And I want to thank the great people of Massachusetts too. And I have so many friends here, including your former great Attorney General Scott Hartsbarger. Sugar Lions, Susan Kingcock. You know, I think about Massachusetts a lot. You guys are important to this great union that we are in. You know, I always think about when Preston Brooks went over from the House side of the Senate to Keene, Senator Sumner, Charles Sumner, nearly killing him right before the Civil War, and how, you know, the senator was out for a long time, but the people of Massachusetts refused to fill his seat. They wouldn't let him resign because they wanted, they said nobody could fill his seat, and also they wanted it to be a message to the people of the country about the brutality of the pro-slavery forces in the country. So yeah, Massachusetts is important. When we lived over in France for a year, and we had a tour with a French historian who studied like all the founders and what they did when they were over in France. And when Jefferson was over there as the ambassador plenipotentiary, according to this professor, he used to get up and he would say, I want to toast the people of France. And he'd say, everybody on earth who loves freedom has two countries, his or her own, in France. And I feel like every American who loves democracy has two states, his or her own, in Massachusetts. You know, when you write a book, then everybody wants to come in here and you talk about the book, but when you write a book, you just want everybody to go out and read your book. So I'm not going to talk too much tonight, I don't think. I want to talk about kind of a political theme at the end of my book, and I don't need to tell you that we're living in a time of a lot of trauma, public trauma and private trauma, a lot of difficulty, public and private, and a lot of struggle, public and private. Of course, today we hear on the right-wing websites people calling for civil war, simply because the Department of Justice is doing its job. During the impeachment trial, everything looks hopeless, you're the hope. And I've quoted that a lot since. And I got a letter right before I left to come up here, and I want to read it to you. And it's from a woman who lives on 49th Street Northwest, Washington, D.C., and she says, Dear Dr. Raskin, I'm writing to let you know that your words saved a life recently. I received this anonymous letter in my mailbox thanking me for the sign that I put up on my door, also enclosed, which was a quote that you attributed to your father. I put that up several days after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. I'm amazed that this person actually wrote to me, and I want you to know how much your words helped her. And thank you for your service to our country and democracy. You and the other members and staff of the committee are my hope during these challenging times. I pray for all of you and your families. Then she enclosed this letter that was put under her door. Hi, I wanted to write you this note to say thank you. On July 5th, I was walking home and I was in a very, very dark place. I thought to myself, universe, please give me a sign to not end my life when I get home. Normally, I don't believe in signs from a greater power, but I was really at my wit's end. That day, I took a different route home while walking, and I ended up on your street for some reason. I looked to the left and I saw the quote on your door. She puts a picture of it. It says, when everything seems hopeless, you're the hope, Representative Jamie Raskin, but of course it's not my words, it's my dad's words. That sign on your door saved my life that night. If I hadn't walked by your house that day, I don't know if I would still be here. Later that night, I went to the emergency room to get the help I needed for my mental health. I'm doing much better now, and I just wanted to extend some gratitude to you because you never know how much you may be helping others. Signed, someone who's lucky to still be here today. And I raise that just because the times are so tough for so many people in a public way, in a private way. And I like to live by the principle, which is that in life and in politics, no good act is ever wasted. And I don't know, really I was thinking about this letter I got, and I don't really know who did the good act. I mean, was it my dad in saying that to us when he was raising us, or was it me just by repeating it and stealing my dad's line, or was it the woman by making the sign, or was the woman who saved her own life by, taking another road and reading it? Then maybe it was Tommy Raskin, because maybe I never would have said that had it not been for him and for the kind of responsibility he took for other people's welfare and other people's fortunes. So I don't know, but we've got to stand together during these tough times. We've got to choose, to be on the side of democracy and humanity and freedom and justice and civility and decency, or to be on the side of authoritarianism and fascism and racism and immigrant bashing and cruelty. I mean, that's really it. And my dad also used to tell us this. He worked for President Kennedy back in the day, and he used to tell us this story about Bobby Kennedy when he was working for the Senate racketeering subcommittee, and they brought in Jimmy Hoffa, and Bobby Kennedy said to him, well, Mr. Hoffa, as the president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters and the Secretary General Treasurer of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters Mid-Atlantic Pension Fund, and he got all this stuff. He said, a man of your great position and power in life can do very great good and very great evil. And then Hoffa, as my dad told it, leaned into his microphone and he said, I intend to live up to both of my responsibilities. So we've got the chance, we've got the obligation to live up to one of our responsibilities today, and I suppose that's really what my book is about. It began as a love letter to our lost son, Tommy, and it kind of closes as a love letter to America, the land that we love and the only home we've ever known. So yeah, I just want to say a few words about kind of the end of the book and where I end up, which is sort of with today. Here I will drop any pretense of political objectivity and neutrality. I'm here as a true blue partisan Democrat, I suppose. But I know that the libraries for everybody, libraries for everybody, for Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Greens, and everything. So I wanted to just start with a few remarks on political nature on kind of a bipartisan note. I wanted to invoke our last great Republican president, Abraham Lincoln. We talked about government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And that's been, Lincoln's words have been the tantalizing, elusive ideal of American history. How are we going to get there? We didn't start that way. Obviously, we started as a slave republic of white male property owners over the age of 21. And that was the way we began. But we also began with ideals of unalienable rights of the people for everyone, like liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And the equality of everyone. All men, you can say women, are created equal. And the anchor principle that government rests legitimately only on the consent of all the governed. Right? Not the 1,000 people who stormed the Capitol, but the 300 million people who make up the country, the consent of the government. And so those ideals became the motor force for change in our country as successive generations of American patriots picked up the banner of forming a more perfect union, to proclaim the ideals of the Declaration and to demand that we make the Republic consistent with those ideals. And if you read the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the amendments the way that I do, you can read it as a chronicle of the progress of America towards a more perfect union. If you look at the 17 amendments that we've added since the original Bill of Rights, the vast majority of them are suffrage expanding, democracy deepening amendments. The 13th Amendment abolishing slavery, and the 14th Amendment giving us equal protection of the laws and due process of the laws. The 15th Amendment banning race discrimination in voting. The 17th Amendment shifting the mode of election of U.S. senators from the state legislatures to the people. The 19th Amendment doubling the franchise and building the political equality of men and women with women's suffrage. The 23rd Amendment giving people in the nation's capital the right to participate in presidential, although not congressional, elections. The 24th Amendment banning poll taxes and abolishing the principle of wealth as a barrier to political participation. And the 26th Amendment lowering the age of voting to 18 across the country. You see, the whole trajectory of our constitutional and political development has been to move towards making our original republic a democratic republic and a democracy, so we can make the claim that we are indeed the world's greatest multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-religious constitutional democracy. And I believe that that's who we are. The framers, who were deeply flawed in their own ways, had the insight to proclaim the principles of freedom of speech and free exercise of religion Jefferson and Madison thought nothing was more important in our constitutional experiments than the idea that we would have what Jefferson called a wall of separation between church and state. They rebelled against centuries of holy crusades and inquisition and witchcraft trials and theocracy. And they wanted to proclaim the principle of freedom of thought, liberty of thinking. That's a freedom that is hard won, and every generation has to win it again. Never take that for granted. They understood the absolute pull of conspiracy theories and deranged ideas and irrationality. They wanted to create government on a principle of reason in public places and in private places, in houses of worship, in religion, in church, in mosque and synagogue. People could believe whatever they wanted. That wasn't up to the government to dictate to people. But in public, they hoped to find Jefferson called the sovereignty of reason. Facts, data, science. They wrote us an Enlightenment Constitution. And we're fighting about that all the time. I tell the story, this happened not long ago. Our friends across the aisle, they blame what they consider the moral downfall of America on the Supreme Court's decision in 1962 in Engel versus Vitale, which struck down a compulsory religious prayer, a Protestant prayer in the public schools of New York that was challenged by Catholic families. And they get up, and every time they say, this was the downfall of America in 1962, when the Supreme Court banned prayer in the public schools. I first remind them that the Supreme Court never banned prayer in the public schools. As long as there are pop math quizzes, there will be prayer in the public schools. Whenever he wants, it's just the government cannot write out a prayer and dictate it to you and compel you to participate in it. And one would think that the current deranged interpretation of the Second Amendment and the free availability of assault weapons is a far greater danger to the school children of America. So anyway, I want to say a word for my party, the Democratic Party, because I know some of my colleagues in Congress have a hard time pronouncing the name of my party, and that they will always say that Democrat Congresswoman with her Democrat bill or Democrat amendment. And for years, I would try to gently prod them along and explain, no, it's really the Democratic Congresswoman, Democratic bill. Then, not long ago, I exploded. I said, okay, you have a self-chosen political speech impediment. And we've got one too. Now every time I try to say the name of your party, it comes out the Banana Republican Party. That's only to get in the mud with them, which I try not to do. But I say, if you really can't pronounce the name of our party, you must do what Franklin D. Roosevelt did. You go back and you read this book that I read not long ago, a great book by H.W. Graham called A Traitor to His Class about FDR. Roosevelt called our party the democracy. He would say the economic royalists and the plutocrats say you invest only in the wealthiest people in society and a little bit of the wealth will rain down on everybody else. But the democracy says invest in the working majority of the country, we will all rise together. That's what Roosevelt said. I want to dust that off. The democracy. At least I would like my party to live up to that beautiful description of who we are. Because I think that we are the only ones defending democracy today as a party. That's not to say we're doing it alone, because when democracy's under attack, you need everybody. You need Liz Cheney. And if you look at the history of right-wing coups against democracy in Chile or Spain or Italy or Argentina or Sri Lanka or you name it, wherever, I hate to break it to people, but the progressive parties can't defend democracy on their own. It is only a coalition between the center-left and the center-right that is able to make it hold. And so we need a big coalition, but let's be clear, the heart of that in America today is the Democratic Party, the democracy, and let's try, all of us, to make the political parties compete for that title. So maybe all of us together could be the democracy, but at this point, it's Roosevelt and it's Eleanor's party. You know, they saw Nazis and fascists marching down the boulevards of Europe, and they did not see very fine people on both sides of the street. They should stop. So my party, I want to be the party of democracy. I don't want it to be the only one, but I want us to stand strong when other people have forgotten their way, have lost their way. And my party, I want to be the party of the civil rights movement and John Lewis and Elijah Cummings. And I want my party to be the party of the women's movement and equal rights movement and pro-choice and reproductive freedom. The party of the LGBTQ movement in America. The party of the labor movement and the AFL-CIO and the National Labor Relations Act and the Fair Labor environmental movement and the climate movement and the Clear Act and I want my party to be the party of science and the scientists and the party of facts. So we got a good close-up look at the alternative on January 6, 2020. That's as close to fascism as I want to come in my lifetime. How about you? You have to see 3 rings of sedition that took place on January 6th. In the outer ring was the crowd that had been summoned to Washington over a tweet by Donald Trump, who invited everyone to come in for a protest to stop the steal, and it's going to be wild, he promised. And it was wild indeed, as the domestic violent extremist groups all RSVP'd yes. The Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, the Aryan Nations, the 3%ers, the QAnon networks, the militia groups, the self-professed militia groups. The only real militias in America are organized by the states under the authority of the federal government, which maintains the power under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, and multiple other provisions to regulate the militias. We don't have unorganized private militias in America, but we did on that day. And those groups got together, and they were the stormtrooper vanguard that smashed our windows, broke down our doors, wounded and injured more than 150 officers, breaking their jaws, their necks, their arms, their legs. People lost fingers. Officers suffered strokes, heart attacks, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress syndrome to this day. So, that was the middle ring of the insurrection. The outer ring of just people who said, yeah, I'll come, and they didn't quite know what they were bargaining for. Some of them were there quite innocently, others came to fight, undoubtedly. But I'll tell you one story on January 7th, when we were left with wreckage and blood on the walls and the floors, ketchup on the walls of the White House and blood on the walls of the Capitol. And on January 7th, the phone calls started coming in to Speaker Pelosi's office in the Capitol Police with people calling in saying, do you guys have a lost and found? Because I left my phone there. There were some people who really thought this was like a Civil War reenactment or something, and they were convinced that Donald Trump had invited them to come. They obviously not brushed up on their separation of powers before they stormed into Congress and drove the vice president out. But the inner ring of the whole thing was the coup. And that's a weird word to use in American political parlance because we don't have a lot of experience with coups in our own country. We think of a coup as something that the military does to the president, but this was a coup conducted by the president against the vice president, against the Congress and the people. But the political scientists know that kind of coup. It's called a self-coup. It's when a president, fearing electoral defeat, decides to overthrow the constitutional order and push aside the election machinery and just declare a succession. Or as Donald Trump put it, there's not going to be a transfer of power, there's just going to be a continuation. There's just going to be a continuation. And that was his vision from the very beginning. Joe Biden beat him by more than 7 million votes. And yet, the Electoral College is such a creaky, antiquated, obsolescent institution that he's able to inhabit every nook and cranny and try to invade it in order to work his strategic mischief against the American people. So first, we'll go to the state legislatures. We'll just get them to void out the popular vote. The Supreme Court said we could do that in Bush versus Gore, so just void out the popular vote and install electors for Trump. But to their credit, even the Republican legislative leaders would not do that in the states they approached, like Pennsylvania and Michigan and Ohio. So then, well, let's go to the election officials. We'll go to Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger in Georgia. Just find the 11,781 votes. That's all I'm looking for. And I'm a politician. That's all I'm looking for. Give me 11,781 votes. That wasn't Donald Trump trying to stop election fraud. That's Donald Trump trying to commit election fraud, caught red-handed on tape, which is why the Georgia prosecutors are making so much progress, it seems, right now. And then those of you who've been watching TV will recognize the other elements of the plan. Let's conduct a mini coup in the Department of Justice. Just make a statement that the election is corrupt and then leave it up to me and the Republican congressman. Not the Republican senators, the Republican congressman. Why? Well, under the 12th Amendment, Donald Trump understood nobody gets a majority in the Electoral College in the joint session on January 6th. Contest moves to the House of Representatives, where we vote, but not on the basis of one member, one vote, but on the basis of one state, one vote. Going into the 2020 elections, the GOP had 26 state delegations. Coming out, they had 27. They picked up Iowa. We lost Abby Finkenauer, and they then controlled the Iowa delegation 3-1. So even had they suffered the defection of my new best friend in Congress, Liz Cheney, as the at-large rep from Wyoming, they still would have had 26 states. So the whole thing, drive it into the House for a contingent election. Deny Biden the majority. That was what they meant to do. Although they thought maybe if they could get Vice President Pence to declare and then exercise unilateral, unlawful, unconstitutional, unprecedented powers to reject electoral college votes from Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania. That would be enough to lower Biden's total below 270 and below where the Republicans were. And maybe we're at that point, and maybe they could just at that point call it over. But if not, if you read the Eastman memo, they were willing to go to the contingent election in order to run it like the Republican National Convention and just wave the banners of the states. That was the plan. And when Pence, stunningly, surprisingly, refused to go along with it, in his day of fiercest constitutional patriotism, and let's give credit where credit's due, nice job on that. And to me, I confess it was a shock because he had demonstrated nothing other than invertebrate sycophancy for the primary. And then that's why Donald Trump needed to bring in the extreme right, the people who would actually commit an insurrection against the Union. So let me just say one thing about insurrection, because now we're in a big fight about the nature of our Constitution, what it stands for, what it protects, and what it doesn't protect. Okay? We say the Constitution protects the private choices, the reproductive and procreative freedom of American women and American men. And they say no. And they say no. We say the Constitution binds us all together, and you do not have a right to take up insurrectionary arms and violence against the Union. And they say the Second Amendment gives them the right to commit insurrection against the Union. And my friends, we got to get this straight as quickly as possible, which is why I'm talking about it wherever I go, and I try to correct them whenever they say it. There are at least 7 places in the Constitution that reject their insurrectionist philosophy of the Constitution. In addition to it just being intrinsically illogical, no, the Constitution does not give you the right to destroy the Constitution. It does not. It's not the only Constitution that's ever existed that operates on that principle of self-destruction. But you can go further than that. How about the treason clause? The only place in the Constitution where a crime is defined, which defines treason as levying arms against the Union. That's a crime. How about the Republican Guarantee Clause, which says that Congress shall guarantee the people of the states a Republican form of government and protect the states against invasion and domestic violence. And that was inserted in the Constitution at the behest of a number of members, including Madison, because of Shays' rebellion, saying that the federal government has got to be there to protect the people and the governments of the states against bands of marauders, insurrectionists who think that they will replace their weapons or substitute their weapons for our governments. Madison said no. How about Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, which says that Congress has the power to call forth the militias in order to suppress insurrections? Is it possible that the Second Amendment, in invisible ink, inscribes in the Constitution a right to commit insurrection when the Constitution gives the federal government and the states the power to suppress insurrections? I don't think so. I don't think so. And my colleagues will get up and they'll say, well, Raskin just wants to repeal the Second Amendment. He just wants us to repeal the Second Amendment. And I say, no, I don't want you to repeal the Second Amendment. I want you to read the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia means a militia regulated by the government, not by the Proud Boys, not by the police, not by the a well-regulated militia. And you don't have to trust me about the meaning of the Second Amendment. You can trust someone as radical as Justice Scalia, who in the Heller versus District of Columbia case said, of course the Second Amendment doesn't mean you have the right to take any weapon of any kind anywhere you want to go. It does not mean that, it's never meant that, said Justice Scalia. These guys are way to the right of Justice Scalia. Justice Scalia said, we have the power as the government to conduct background checks on people before they purchase weapons, and that's what more than 90% of the American people support. A universal violent criminal background check. That's what we need in America. No, you don't have a right to get your own nuclear weapons or machine guns, and you don't have the right to get your own military-style semi-automatic weapons on your 18th birthday so you can go and destroy an entire second state. And we've got to get that straight. And we've got to be very clear that there is nothing to this insurrectionist theory of the Constitution. What is Chip Roy and Jim Jordan, what do those guys quote against me? They've got two things. One, they've got a quote from Patrick Henry, an anti-federalist who voted against the Constitution because he said it vested too much power in the Constitution to put down insurrections by the people. So that's meaningless and worthless. And then what do they have? Well, they go to the Declaration of Independence. And this is interesting because the Declaration of Independence, of course, stands for the principle that when, in the course of human events, it becomes time for one people to dissolve the bands of unity with another because of a long train of abuses and usurpations against the people that were willing to list out those injustices, then we have not a constitutional right, not a right under the Magna Carta, we have a natural law right to take up arms in order to vindicate freedom and democracy. But if you want to overthrow the government of the United States, if you want to attack our officers, if you want to storm our Capitol, you do it on your own time, with your own money, and at your own risk, because you've got no rights under the Constitution to destroy the people's democracy. If you want to talk about some truly courageous people, look at the American Civil Rights Movement, a movement of nonviolent civil disobedience to vindicate real rights under the Constitution with real grievances against injustice and against racists and racism. And even the people in that great movement, Dr. King and Bob Moses, all of them were willing to submit to arrest and do time in jail. They didn't claim that the Constitution even gave them a right to nonviolent civil disobedience. They were willing to pay the price, and these fascists and maniacs come out and think that the Constitution gives them the right to use violent disobedience against our government. And we've got to make it very clear, it does not. And we've got to make it clear also people across the country on our side that defund the police, if anybody's still talking about that, is not going to be a proper strategy for defeating fascists in the 21st century. The black and Hispanic cops who saved our lives on January 6th are the last people to talk about defunding the police. Let's invest in the police, let's train the police, let's reform the police, but let's stand up for democracy in America. I've gone on too long. You've got me a little bit excited here. quote two people I've been keeping close to my heart through this process. Frederick Douglass, a great Marylander, who said, if there's no struggle, there's no progress. The struggle may be moral, may be physical, may be moral and physical, but there must be struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. There's a message to you from Frederick Douglass and the people of Maryland. And then I'll leave you finally with the words of Tom Paine, after whom our son Tommy was named. And you know, Paine came here 2 years before the Revolution in 1774. He fell in love with the great promise of America. He said America would become an asylum to humanity. Not an insane asylum. A place of refuge, he said, for people fleeing from political and economic and financial oppression from all over the world. A place of opportunity for people to find and exercise freedom of all kinds. And he said that once America became America, then it would become a model of the rest of the world. He said, the cause of America will become the cause of mankind. That's the America that I believe in. An America that will stand up for democracy and human rights against Putin in Russia and Orban in Hungary and Duterte or Marcos in the Philippines and El Sisi in Egypt and Erdogan in Turkey. All of the kleptocrats and dictators from Moscow to Mar-a-Lago, those are the enemies of So Paine, in 1776, he wrote Common Sense, of course, which so came to influence Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence. But he also wrote this pamphlet called The Crisis. And I want to quote just a little passage of The Crisis to you. And Speaker Pelosi always makes me update the language so as not to offend modern sensibilities. And she is right that Tom Paine was a great feminist as well as an abolitionist. So anyway, he said, these are the times that try men and women's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will shrink at this moment from the service of their cause and their country, but everyone that stands with us now will win the love and the favor and the affection of every man and every woman for all time. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, but we have this saving consolation. The more difficult the struggle, the more glorious in the end will be our victory. So let's make that victory ours in this new century. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate that. Susie tells me we're moving into our question period. I'm going to repeat people's questions because there's not a microphone in the audience, and then I'll do my best to be short. Actually, I'll be short. To be brief. Yes.
I was wondering if you could give advice to those of us who are currently in the state of Massachusetts, where our elected officials generally don't do what we would like to do. What is the best way for us to reach out to congressmen in other states and the most effective impact?
So the question is just if you're satisfied with what your representatives are doing, and you come from a deep blue state, but you're still concerned that what's the best way to reach out to other representatives in other places. Well, I'll tell you what we do in the project that I run. I come from a blue district that just got bluer, but I don't spend any of the campaign money I raise on TV, radio, consultants, pollsters, none of that stuff. It all goes into a school for young people called Democracy Summer, and then they come out in the summer, and then we educate them about the civilizing movements of our days, and we get them involved in canvassing and voter registration and digital organizing and the whole thing. So you've got to have that regional consciousness. There are a lot of swing districts still in New England, in Connecticut, in New Hampshire with Annie Custer and Chris Pappas, up in Maine too, with Jared. So there's a lot of districts where you can go out, you can knock on doors and work with people. But if you need further direction, get in touch with me and Democracy Summer. And by the way, anybody who wants to, send me an email and I'll put you on my list and you'll never be lonely again.
Yes? So I'm wondering, I think a lot of people at this time in the political climate are feeling pretty hopeless. I'm 19 years old, and it's hard as a young person not to feel pretty hopeless right now with climate change and political climate stuff. And I'm wondering, as someone who's on the ground working to change things and make things a little less hopeless, what advice you would give to I don't know, keep positive?
Yeah. What are you doing now? Are you in school?
I'm in school.
Are you in Massachusetts? Or?
I go to Brown.
Well, the young people of America are going to save us. It's very clear. You come from a remarkable generation that is beyond racism and homophobia and anti-Semitism and misogyny and unfortunately it's a little beyond grammar too, but that's good. But I will say the values of this generation are pretty remarkable, and you guys just need to get organized. And so, you've just got to make it as fun as possible. You've got to, make fighting fascism in the 21st century fun. It's just got to be a fun experience. And remember, and again, I keep chastising myself for being too political. I don't want to endanger anybody's 501c3 status or anything, right? I guess, I would just say people need to understand the vast majority of the American people support strong democracy in America. It's not even close. And Hillary beat him by 3 million votes, and Joe Biden beat him by 7.5 million votes. And the young people are coming our way. It's a race between the popular will of the overwhelming majority of the people all across the country. As we saw in Kansas, let's hear it from people. It's a race between the popular will and then a series of anti-democratic devices and instruments like voter suppression, gerrymandering of our state and federal districts, the manipulation of the electoral college, to give us 5 popular vote losers in our history, twice in this century alone, and then the use of the filibuster to destroy legislation that would vindicate people's voting rights. So we've got to break that vicious cycle we're in with that matrix of democracy suppression, and it begins with the elections in 2022. That's it. Be smart. You understand the Electoral College. You understand American-based federalism. I spoke to some students at GW not long ago. I said, I'll give you the advice I give to the little kids in soccer. Don't bunch. Not everybody needs to live in Berkeley or Brooklyn, okay? Spread out across the country. Get your 20 best friends and move to West Virginia. Move to North Carolina, move to Georgia, move to Nevada, and we'll be all right. Yes?
I watched live the insurrection on January 6th. I've probably seen it, films of it, dozens if not more times. I've watched just about every minute of your marvelously done was said by McCarthy and Donald, everybody right after it happened. I would have thought that was the turning moment of this country in terms of looking at what Trump had done. It seems like it's forgotten. It seems like people aren't astounded. What is your feeling about this? And also, do you think your hearings are going to have a sway? Do you think that, what is your hope for your hearings?
Well, I appreciate very much what you said. I mean, Donald Trump is not to be underestimated in any way. He exercises a powerful stranglehold over millions of people in the GOP, and they depend on him to bring in lots of people who would otherwise not be in the Republican Party. He's transformed the character of the Republican Party. He's got people like Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, who he's insulted personally, right? I mean, he insulted Ted Cruz's wife's looks. He said Ted Cruz's father killed JFK. And he's got these people eating out of the palm of his hand, right? And so getting the truth out to the American people is necessary, but it's not sufficient. It's got to be followed up with organizing, and then we've got to make sure that the government is able to work. And throughout this process, when people have asked me about DOJ and Attorney General Garland and all that, I say it is not my role. One of the things that Donald Trump destroyed was the tradition of the political branches not trying to dictate the law enforcement function, which is independent, which should be left alone. And also, Attorney General Garland is my constituent, so I don't beat up for my constituents. But the truth is that I have been praying fervently that our system of justice would work, and I think it's working. I think that the rule of law, it takes time, because we're not an authoritarian society, because you do have to do things like go to a neutral, impartial magistrate and demonstrate probable cause that there is evidence of crime that So I think all of that is happening, but Donald Trump, who's been a little Houdini-like, or a little like a mob boss in terms of being able to fortify himself with just buffers between him and all of the criminality that he engenders, I think he's met his match in the January 6th Select Committee. I can take 2 or 3 more. Yep.
So I want to thank you for writing this book. It truly is a love story, and I very much with tears. It's an incredible book. I share something in common with you, in that I spent 4 years yelling emoluments at the television, and nothing happened. You talked about holding yourself accountable for the fact that you could have moved articles of impeachment earlier if you had pursued that. You're a pretty persuasive guy. Why couldn't you get your colleagues to act on it? It was so clear what was happening. And I asked that question, I know we're looking forward, but this could happen again, and everybody seems to be a blind eye to the violation of that clause.
Well, thank you for raising that, and for your comments. Did you read that part of the book about?
I did, yeah.
I mean, for those who think that my book is a partisan polemic, like my speech tonight, check out the book, because I am very hard on us, the Democrats, for not blowing the whistle from day one on what was obvious to millions of people in America, which was that for Donald Trump, this was a money-making operation from the beginning. And he was in business. He's literally in business in 150 different businesses around the world. He refused to divest himself from anything. He was collecting millions and millions and millions of dollars in foreign government emoluments from Saudi Arabia and Turkey and the United Arab Emirates, and you name it, at the Trump International Hotel, which I call the Washington Monument. And he pocketed tens of millions of dollars from the U.S. government itself in violation of the Domestic Emoluments Clause, which says that the President of the United States is limited to receiving a salary, which is now set at $400,000, and can receive no other money. So all of the federal government departments that were going to the Trump hotels and the golf courses and paying for this and that, all of that was illegal. It was unconstitutional, and we failed. Really, we came close one time when he went way out on a limb and said he was going to have the meeting of the what was it, G7. Thank you, Sarah. The G7 was going to meet at the golf course down in Florida, and everybody was going to go there, and the U.S. government was going to pay, and other governments were going to pay, and why not? We let him do all the other stuff, and there was such an explosion that he pulled back. But that was the moment, I think, that I was given the green light to go forward with these emolument resolutions, declaring all of them unlawful and demanding repayment to the government, because that money doesn't belong to him, it belongs to us. I mean, Abraham Lincoln, the king of Siam gave him an elephant tusk, which he loved, and so he went to Congress. He did the right thing, because you're not allowed to accept an emolument, which just means a gift, a payment from a foreign government, unless Congress approves it. And he went to Congress and said, I really love this elephant tusk, can I keep it? And Congress said, no. So, right? Government never even asked whether he could keep these millions and millions of dollars. So part of it was people would say, Raskin, nobody knows what an emolument is. And I say, it's just a payment. Tell them it's a payment. So it's too complicated. It sounds, and I said when we got to Ukraine, and I was totally convinced of the criminality of the Ukraine shakedown, but I said, this is going to be a lot harder for people to understand than Donald Trump pocketing millions and millions of dollars every day. So anyway, that's something that we got to figure out, along with the 25th Amendment, along with Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, all of that. You can give the cert, number 2 minutes. Yes?
Yes, I find myself trying to convince a lot of my friends to be optimistic about what's going on. And I see lots of green shoots, and I realize what you're saying.
Lots of
green shoots. Big, flowers blossoming all over the place as far as discovering what's going on. And I think that one thing that people can really take part in is something that Colleen Keating said recently, I believe you would endorse, that people are coming forward like crazy now. They want to speak to the committee. Is that true?
Yeah.
Are these serious people that are going to, be witnesses and
Yeah, I mean,
hear the day?
we talked to more than 1,000 people. The vast majority of them really want to come forward and tell the truth and exactly what they know. Some of them call us back and say, after they see some testimony, oh, I think I remember something, I need to clear this up. But the truth is just like that. It has such a propulsive force. And even when there was one effort to try to discredit Cassidy Hutchinson, about her reporting the story she'd been told about the struggle within the Secret Service car, and it was, by a bunch of old guys, none of whom agreed to come and testify under oath. And so I said, you know what? Cassidy Hutchinson appears to be a 1,000% credible witness who has no incentive to lie, no motive to lie, and she's just giving an account of what somebody else told her. And if you disagree with it, come forward, swear under oath, and tell us what you got. But otherwise, nobody's laid a glove on any of our witnesses. When you get to the bottom also of this effort to destroy texts and to bury the evidence, because every time someone has thought, he was going to be clever by burying evidence or destroying text, somebody else comes forward to tell the truth. They'll get their comeuppance.
I was just wondering if you would ever consider running for president.
to say, I have no bloodlust for that office. If you read what I've written, I believe Article 1 is the preeminent branch. We're the lawmaking branch. I think that Joe Biden is going to run and win, but I will do whatever history requires of us. I really will.
I tell you how much I respect and admire you as a congressman, but I respect you even more as a person. And I wish there were more people like you in Washington, because I feel you do care for the little people. I'm from upstate New York. My dad's right here. I come up every month to help him out because he's disabled, as am I. I've had the worst health insurance. I've been denied. Finally found a doctor who persisted and got my insurance and then canceled it. I drove an hour to get the procedure done and then canceled it at 5 in the morning. I watch the news and I see what's going on with abortion, like taking away our rights as women, the voting rights for people. Like, I heard the Louis Armstrong song, and before it came on, it's like, love, baby, love. Like, if there was more love in this country, it would be such a better world. And in this country. I have cousins who's totally like we vowed to not talk politics from me because I know our relationship will end.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for saying all that beautiful stuff. And it's a wonderful way for us to close because it's been a tough time publicly, it's been a tough time privately, and it's all connected now. It's obvious. And we're not going to be able to do the things we need to do to save our species against climate change and get health care to all of our people, which all of the other rich democracies have somehow been able to do, even though we haven't done it. If we're spending our time fighting Proud Boys and Oath Keepers and racists and fascists, so we've got to defeat them soundly and put that behind us and move forward. What you said about love, and it's very tough to translate love, the emotion that's so powerful in our private lives, into public life, but sometimes it can come out, and this isn't bad as justice, and if we can settle for justice, that won't be bad at all. So.